with the winter sowing process. And look at that. And speaking of Dusty Miller, I want to show you something. It is finally spring and the weather is warming up enough where we can get out in the garden and start doing some things. I'm beginning to harden off some cool weather seedlings. I have some new hellebore varieties to share with you and a few other spring things. Hi, it's Steph, and I can finally say welcome to my garden again, because today we're going to be doing some things out here. And the first thing that I did was bring out some of these seedlings that we started back at the end of January, beginning of February. And these are all cool weather annuals that are getting ready to be planted out in the garden. So here I have some bachelor's buttons that are doing really great, as well as some black pansies, black deviled pansies, and some violas. In this tray here, I also have some snapdragons, and these are all plants that do really well in the cool temperatures of spring. Some Dusty Miller. Now these are still smaller, but wait till we get down the wall. There's a tray that has really beautiful looking seedlings. Some sweet peas. And look at this alyssum. It's actually already starting to bud up and bloom. This was started on the 27th of January. And look at them. They smell like honey. They have a really nice fragrance and a really pretty dainty little flower. So I'm excited to get those planted out soon. Some ranunculus that I started with corms that I picked up at the Home Depot recently, and they're looking really good. Here are some more forget-me-nots, and these are some more black devil pansies. And look at these Dusty Miller. They're starting to get that beautiful silver gray coloring on the foliage. These are super easy to start from seed. I started them for the first time last year and I was hooked. Super easy, great, cool, tolerant plant. Does well all summer and even into the fall when we get our first hard frost. And speaking of Dusty Miller, I want to show you something. I actually had these planted in these terracotta pots last season. These are the ones that I started from seed, the new look Dusty Miller. And I was afraid that my terracotta pots would crack outside in the winter with the freeze-thaw cycle. So I brought them into my basement and look at the Dusty Miller. It made it all through the winter. I watered it maybe twice and it still looks excellent. So all I have to do is clean these pots up, plant a couple of things in here, maybe pop in an alyssum and a pansy, and they're good to go for spring containers. So these are an excellent annual to start from seed. Highly recommend if you haven't yet. And here are the beautiful new hellebores that I received this week, sent over from Walter's Gardens, and they're beautiful ones. Some of them are from the Wedding Party series that I didn't yet have in my collection. And I absolutely love hellebore. In fact, some of the ones that I have in my garden, in my woodland bed, are already blooming. So I'm going to go through, clean them up, and fertilize them, and I will share these varieties with you. And here is the woodland bed where I have all of my hellebore planted, and they are starting to bloom and look really beautiful. So it's time to go through and clean up all of the foliage. Now they have really beautiful thick foliage. They are very reminiscent of the foliage on a magnolia and how thick they are. And they make a great ground cover. But at this point in the season, late winter, early spring, the leaves do get a bit tattered and need to be cleaned up, which is fine because this is just about the time when they start to bloom. So we can clean up all the old foliage where the blooms will really shine, and then they will start putting out new leaves. So that's what I'm going to take care of. I can see there are a ton of them in bloom. I can even see that even though these are deer resistant, they get pretty hungry at this point in the season and they've started to chomp on some of the leaves. You can kind of tell here. This is deer damage. So I'm going to go through, clean these all up, and I can't wait to see how many buds are under all of this foliage. To clean up the hellebore, what I do is I'm going to go through and clean up all of the foliage, but I'm kind of careful in how I do this because I don't want to risk cutting off any of these buds that are getting ready to bloom. So I just follow the leaf all the way down to the base of the plant and I make a cut. And that's what it looks like. And here is the old foliage. And then I just get rid of that. And then once the plant is done blooming, it's gonna push out all new foliage. So I'm gonna get this all cleaned up, and it's always so satisfying to see how beautiful the blooms look once it's cleaned. So George asked me if I needed some help, and he got down here and started helping me, and he wanted to know what they're supposed to look like when they're done. And this is what you're supposed to end up with. A little bouquet of buds just like this. And you can actually see that really looks pretty actually. And then right here, there is already a little bouquet of hellebore that are in full bloom. And as you go up this hill, there are even some more. So that's what we want to end up with, a bunch of bouquets of hellebore blooms. Isn't it amazing what was hiding underneath all of those leaves? They look so much better, and now the blooms can really shine. So the only thing that's left to do now is go through and fertilize them. And to fertilize my hellebore, I like to use Plant Tone, which is an organic granular fertilizer that you just put around the plant, scratch it into the soil, and every time that it rains, it'll fertilize the plants. So I'm gonna go through and do that now, and then these will be all set for the season. Here's a little tip and something that I've been doing for a couple of seasons now, using an old tomato sauce jar or any kind of glass jar to apply my fertilizer, because it's really easy to scoop into the bag and it gives you a lot of control when you go ahead and just sprinkle it around the plant. I mean, you can use an old measuring cup too, but if you have a jar laying around, you can recycle these for either putting cut flowers in during the growing season or to apply fertilizer. I'm in a gardening zone 6B, 7A, and what I have found to work best for me is to clean up all of the hellebore foliage around St. Patrick's Day. In the past, I used to do it around Valentine's Day, and about 3 years ago, we had a polar vortex that came through. It was really cold, and after I had cleaned up all of the foliage, my buds were exposed and they got zapped by that freezing cold temperatures, and I lost a lot of my flowers that year. So now I wait a little bit longer and I use St. Patrick's Day as my gauge for it to be safe enough for me to clean up all of my hellebore foliage. Now that I'm done fertilizing, I'm going to show you these new varieties and where I'm going to plant these hellebore. So you can see here that I have this woodland bed that sort of borders this path that I have between our Japanese maple garden and this bed. So I'm going to continue this woodland bed down this way, and that's where these hellebore are going to go to serve sort of as a ground cover. Now I've already started doing some planting here, and I have a couple of Japanese maples and even a larch, which, fun fact, a larch is actually an evergreen that loses all of its needles or its foliage for the winter. So it's deciduous, and now it's starting to leaf out. And it's really cool little evergreen, kind of looks like a Charlie Brown Christmas tree, but I did plant it there. And this is a moonrise Japanese maple. And so this area here is going to get planted this season. You can see that there is some fabric here, and the purpose of this is strictly for weed suppression, because this back area here was a woodland area, and we had lots of briar, which is a really noxious weed with thorns, and mugwort and Japanese pokeweed. So we had to keep all of those weeds down back in this area. So to do that, we used a greenhouse grade landscape fabric, and it's been doing a great job of suppressing all of that. But now that I want to plant in this area, I'm going to cut out all of this fabric, and I'm going to plant the hellebore as well as some other woodland plants in this area. Let me give you a little bit of information about hellebores. They like to be planted in a woodland or in a shady spot underneath the canopy of deciduous trees, because while they like to be shaded, they need a little bit of sun in order to set blooms and to bloom nicely. So if you plant them under the canopy of trees in the winter, when all of the trees are bare, they will get sun so that they can set buds for their bloom show in the spring. So that is the best place to plant them. They like a soil that is moist but well drained, and they're usually hardy anywhere between a zone 4 and 5 to a zone 9. And here I'm in a zone 6B, 7A, and they do really well in my garden. They are generally pest free, and the only thing that I have found here is that sometimes the deer will nibble on them, on the foliage, but they generally take a bite and leave them alone. So they are deer and rabbit resistant, which is great. So this is the area that I'm going to plant these varieties, and let me show you what they are. They're beautiful. So this one here is a gorgeous white double petaled variety with some speckling in a purple pink color. And this is Wedding Party Confetti Cake. This one here is stunning. This is also a wedding party series Lenten rose. And fun fact, they're called Lenten rose because they generally bloom during the season of Lent. And this one's called Mother of the Bride. And here is the bloom. I have two of these. And look at the bloom on Mother of the Bride. It is gorgeous. It's also a frilly one, and it looks like it is yellow with a bit of blush pink. And then this variety in the front here is called True Love, and I actually already have one of these in my garden, and this is a really beautiful burgundy one that is also frilly. And I have two of those as well. And the last one that I have here is called New York Night, which is a black single petal variety that I also have one in my garden. It is stunning. This one does not have any blooms on it yet, but the foliage looks really beautiful and healthy. Let's go over some of these varieties that I have here that are currently in bloom. This really beautiful ivory white one is actually called Ivory Prince. And I originally started with 3 of them, and I was able to divide them. I've had them for several years, and now I have 6 clumps. And it's a really pretty one. The thing with hellebores is they bloom for a really long time. Even after they start losing their color, they still look really beautiful. Here I have 2 of the gold collection hellebores, and these are the Ice and Roses Red, and they are gorgeous. Look at that. And I have several of the Wedding Party series, which is exclusive to Walter's Gardens. And some of them are starting to bloom. This one here is called Confetti Cake. That's very similar to one of the new varieties that I just received. This was one that I added last year, which is also part of the wedding series. And it is stunning. Look at the color on this one. Isn't that so pretty? This one is called Sandy Shores, and it has a deep color, kind of like a plum on the back with some light yellow. Just really gorgeous. And this one here is a really deep maroon purple, and it is called Rome in Red, and it's part of the Honeymoon series, also by Walter's Gardens. It's a really deep color and really beautiful. Here's the tag on this one. I thought that I would show you how the Gomphrena that I'm growing in my winter sowing is doing. So if you've been around the channel for a little while and you're growing Gomphrena along with me, now would be the time to get them started. They are an annual, and they do like to be pre-soaked, the seeds, before you sow them. So put your seeds in some water for about 24 hours before you sow them, and they'll germinate really well. So here is my winter sown Gomphrena, and because we made this mini greenhouse with the winter sowing process, it has a pretty moist environment, which has helped the chaff on the seed break down pretty well. And look at that, we have Gomphrena seedlings. Gomphrena does really well with winter sowing, but I also have a tray growing inside under grow lights just in case something were to happen to this jug or I didn't get enough germination. Because each year I like to line my front walkway border all full of Gomphrena. So I wanted to make sure I'd have enough plants. So if you haven't started Gomphrena yet, now would be the time to do it. It's not too late. It's a warm weather annual, so you can grow it either inside under grow lights or in a winter sowing container. Just go ahead and soak those seeds for 24 hours before you sow them, and in no time you should have some Gomphrena seedlings. Since we're in this area and I've gotten a lot of new subscribers over the last several months, I thought that I would just share with you what this space is. This is my raised bed garden, and it's where I grow a lot of cut flowers during the growing season to make arrangements. And I really love this space. We had originally some wooden raised beds in here that were about 7 years old and had rotted pretty badly. So last spring we created a video from beginning to end, the whole process of updating the rotted wood beds to these beautiful metal raised beds by Vigor Garden. And I can link that video below in case you missed it and you want to check it out. But I have really loved these raised beds in this area, and the spring is the perfect time to undertake a project like this. And I've been really happy with these. I've noticed I have some green coming up, so things are starting to happen in here. If you've never grown chives before, they are an excellent perennial herb to grow. They're all green now, and pretty soon, by May usually, they bloom in these pretty little purple ball-shaped blooms. And my garlic that we planted in the fall is all green and popping up from the soil. So this means now that it's spring, it's time to give it some fertilizer. So I'm going to use the Plant Tone, which is an organic granular all-purpose fertilizer that we just used on the hellebores, and give my garlic a feed. But you will be seeing a lot more beautiful flowers growing in this space this season. It is so windy that just now while we were filming a segment, my planter with all of my tulip bulbs and hyacinth bulbs knocked over, soil everywhere. So I don't know what this is going to look like when it blooms, but I guess it's the reality of being outside when it's windy like this. All right, I got most of the bulbs back in my planter and the soil. I also watered it to weight it down because it's so windy that things are drying out and it's making it more lightweight, which is probably why it knocked over. We used the leaf blower to clean up the rest of the soil, and I'm gonna actually tuck it right here next to this other planter that seems to be more protected because it hasn't fallen, and you can see how nice the bulbs look. And now this one was set back a little bit. So we'll see how that goes. But I wanted to show you a couple more things that are happening back here. The other day I had about an hour, so I went through and I quickly pruned my hedge of little lime hydrangeas. Now it is really easy to prune paniculata type hydrangeas. You can take the shrub down by about a third, and because they bloom on new wood, you won't affect any of the blooms. So it's really foolproof to do, really. So all you have to do is take out any branches that look dead, anything that is crossing, or anything that is really thin, less than a pencil, kind of twiggy. Cut those out to clean it up, and then you just make a cut above a bud node. So that's it. So these are ready to go. I also went ahead and I gave them some fertilizer before we were set to get some rain, and I fed them with Hollytone, which is a acidic fertilizer, which is great for hydrangeas. So you can use Hollytone, or you can even use Rose Tone. And it's just a granular fertilizer that you'll put around the drip edge of the plant and scratch it into the soil, and that's it. And you can see that I have a bunch of green foliage. Now this is tulips, and I didn't plant them this year. I planted them last year. Now tulips are usually treated like an annual because they don't reliably return as perennial. But these are Darwin variety tulips, which are more reliably perennial. So we will see what happens. They're Darwin pink, so I'm hoping that I won't just get foliage and that I'll get some pretty blooms as well. Now in this bed, I also have some more tulips coming up, but I have a quickfire hydrangea that I still have to prune. So I'm gonna work on that this week. But I noticed that my beautiful Dr. Merrill magnolia is starting to crack buds. Look at this. So this tree blooms for us every year in April. So it is right on schedule, has beautiful, large, and fragrant white blooms. When it's in bloom, the fragrance is intoxicating. You can smell it in this whole area when the wind blows around. And I just love it. This is a memorial tree that we planted here in memory of one of our dogs that passed away. And I just love it. But I want to share something with you in case you're starting to do some of your garden cleanup. When I go through and prune this quickfire hydrangea, I'm also going to take care of this astilbe that I have planted here. Now, astilbe is a part shade loving plant, and I have found from growing it over the last several years that it likes a moist soil. So if you have astilbe that isn't blooming very well, it's because it needs moisture and it loves fertilizer. So feed your astilbe right now and it will return beautiful blooms for you. So these have gorgeous plume type blooms, and I usually clean it up and feed it right around now, the beginning of spring. So I'm going to clean up all this foliage, cut down all of the old growth, and I will give it some Plant Tone, which is an all-purpose fertilizer. I'll scratch it around the plant, and that is it. It'll be ready to go for the season. I took a look at the extended forecast, and we don't have any deep freezes coming up, so I decided this was the perfect opportunity to put out my hose. We installed 2 of these Vigor retractable hoses last season. The one in the front is mounted on our home, and this one here is mounted on a post. So we made a video that shows different mounting options, and I've really loved having a retractable hose. It just makes cleanup really easy. When you're done with your hose, you just bring it back to the case and it keeps things nice and tidy. And I am a Vigo ambassador, so if you're ever interested in any Vigo products, always check the description of the video. I always have Hooked and Rooted exclusive discount codes listed there. The reason I needed to get my hose out is because recently I picked up a bunch of Isley plants at my local nursery, and I'm going to be using these in different planting projects over the next couple of months, so now I'll be able to easily water them to keep them happy. It's time to get these seedlings back inside and under the grow lights. They spent about 5 hours outside today, and this is about the third day that I've been working on hardening these off. And what that means is that anytime that you grow seedlings inside under grow lights in a very controlled environment, you need to slowly acclimate them to the outside conditions, the sun, the wind, the temperatures, and so forth. So to do that, over the course of a week or two, you just gradually increase the number of hours that your plants spend outside. So 5 hours today on day 3, I think is pretty good. So over the next week or so, I probably will start transitioning some of these into outside planters and into my raised bed garden. But for now, they're all going back inside. So thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will catch you in the next one.